Hello, and welcome you to our study today. We'll be looking at the book of Job, chapter 2. So if you would, turn in your Bibles to Job chapter 2, and we'll be looking at the book verse by verse. In verses 1 through 6, Satan visits the Lord again. Verse 1, again there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. Verse 1, here he says again. If we read the previous chapter, you notice that he began pretty much the same way and repeats that here in this passage. There was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Job chapter 1 and verse 6. While some suggest that it was the angels who presented themselves before the Lord in heaven, this is uncertain. All we know is that the sons of God presented themselves before the Lord. We also learn that Satan came among them, Job 1 and verse 6. Verse 2, and the Lord said to Satan, from where do you come? Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. The Lord asked Satan, the adversary, the accuser, his whereabouts. Again, this is not for his information, but for the sake of the sons of God and Satan who were there. Satan says that he was walking the earth. Job 1 and 7. As was said by Peter, the apostle in the New Testament, your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8, very similar to what we see here with Satan, the devil in the New Testament, the same. Verse 3. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil, and still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause. Again, the Lord commends his servant Job. Have you considered my servant Job? His commendation of the character of Job remains unchanged, despite the efforts of Satan. He is said to be, by the writer of the book, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil. Job 1 and 8. As said by the writer, Job was blameless and upright and one who feared God and shunned evil. Job 1 and 1. Despite the loss of his possessions, his servants, and yes, even his children, his sons and his daughters, the Lord said that Job still holds fast to his integrity. Hold fast or maintains his integrity. He's undivided in his loyalty to God. He fears God and will not curse him, as was alleged by Satan. Proverbs 11 and verse 3 uses the same term here translated integrity. The idea behind integrity is that of being whole, complete, undivided. The integrity of the upright will guide them, but the perversity of the unfaithful will destroy them. And so Solomon in Proverbs 11 and 3 contrasts those of integrity with those of perversity. According to Wren, we see the term suggests that which is whole, complete, and transparently free of duplicity. Earlier, Satan impugned the character of Job, saying, does Job fear God for nothing? Job 1 and 9. The Lord permitted Satan to test Job, we see in chapter 1, verse 13. And now despite his losses, Job continues to fear God. The idea behind for nothing and without cause are the same here in Job 1:9 and Job 2:3. Satan accused him, Job, without cause or for nothing. Ultimately, though, we see there's some benefit in his testing, in his patience, and ultimately that God and his blessing to Job. Verse 4. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to his face, to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life. So here in verse 4, again, Satan responds to the Lord. He accuses the Lord, and he accuses Job by saying that he was willing to give up the lives of others only to preserve his own life, skin for skin. To better understand what he means by skin for skin, look at the last part of verse 4. Yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. All that a man has, that would be the first term, skin, for, and then the second term, skin, his life. So here you have giving all for his life, according to Satan. Verse 5. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face. Satan continues his accusation against Job. He accuses the Lord too. Accuses the Lord of not permitting him to do enough against Job. Earlier, Satan incited the Lord against Job, according to Job 1:11. He said, but now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, that he will surely curse you to his face. So here Satan makes the second challenge to the Lord. The Lord permitted Satan while limiting his power. Job 1:12, behold, all that he has is in your power literally in your hand. Only do not lay a hand on his person. Job 1:12. And so now Satan incites the Lord against Job, and he insists that the Lord touch his bone and his flesh, that is, his person. The Lord restricted him from doing so at first, and now he challenges the Lord to do so now. If the Lord does so, then Job will surely curse him to your face, Lord. Verse 6. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life. The Lord permits Satan to act against Job, his servant. He puts Job's person, his bone and his flesh, in the hand of Satan. However, he again restricts Satan from taking his life. So here we see with all his power, Satan's power is limited by the Lord. Verse 1, or section 1, Satan visits the Lord. Section 2, Job loses his health. Verse 7, so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Verses 7 to 10, he loses his health. Verses 7 to 8, we see the testing of Job. Here in verse 7, after getting permission from the Lord, Satan left his presence. Satan struck Job with painful boils. This particular disease is not identified in the text. People have their different ideas, but it's not identified, and we won't venture a guess. Whatever the loathsome affliction that afflicted Job, These boils were everywhere on his skin, from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head. That's what we know from the text. And so these boils, these painful boils or sores upon his body. Verse 8. And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. Job took a potsherd to scrape his skin. A potsherd is a piece of broken pottery. And so some versions provide the meaning of the term, explanation of the word. And so Job scraped himself with this pottery fragment, this potsherd. Why? Because of the painful boils. Perhaps because of the itching. Because of the pain, to try to seek some relief. He did so while he sat in the midst of the ashes. Sitting on the ground in the midst of the ashes may express his deplorable condition, away from others. Something similar is found elsewhere, such as in 2 Samuel 12 and 16. Sometimes people sat in ashes as a custom of grief and sorrow. And here in this passage, we see him sitting in these ashes in his deplorable condition. What were the symptoms of Job's affliction, his disease? Job's friends later on did not recognize him at a distance in Job 2 and 12. And so this disease really affected his appearance. He was unrecognizable by his friends from a distance. We see in Job 2:7 that he experienced these boils, these painful boils or sores. In Job 2 and 8, we see him scraping his skin out of pain or perhaps itching. We see in Job 7 and 5 how that there were worms or maggots in his skin, his cracked, open skin. We see in Job 7 and 4 his sleeplessness, unable to sleep at night. In Job 16:16, how his face was flushed, how his eyelids were darkened. Job 16:16. And in Job 19:17, we see how his breath was offensive, was very bad. In Job 19:20, we see how that he experienced weight loss. In Job 30 and 17, again, pain. He describes this gnawing pain. In Job 30 and 30, we see that he describes this blackened skin, the skin peeling or flaking off, the fever that he experienced in Job 30 and 30, and other such symptoms. We do see from passages like Job 7 and 3 that his affliction continued for months prior to the visitation of his friends. A long time to suffer in this way. In verses 9 to 10, we see the patience of Job. Verse 9, then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. Job maintained his integrity after the losses of his property, his servants, his children, sons and daughters. Job 2 and 3. Job continues to maintain his integrity after the loss of his health, despite what Satan said of him. He was wrong. The wife of Job acknowledges that her husband is a man of integrity. He fears God and he is undivided in his loyalties to him. However, after seeing his affliction, this wife of her husband, having experienced affliction herself, she is no longer appears to be loyal to God. She suggests that her husband no longer maintain his integrity. She suggests that her husband curse God. Let's look briefly at the wife of Job. The wife of Job is not identified by name. The book of Job focuses on the suffering of the man named Job. However, we also know that the wife of Job suffered too. She lost her possessions, and she lost her children, her sons, and her daughters. She suffered too. While she did not lose her health, as his wife, she witnessed the sharp decline in Job's health and his long suffering. However, she did not have the same degree of patience that we see in her husband, Job. From the perspective of Job's wife, it would be better for Job to curse God and renounce him, welcome death as a release from his suffering, than to continue to live fearing God and to continue to suffer. As with so many others, she was wrong that death is necessarily a release from suffering. Satan uses Job's wife as an instrument for temptation for Job. Remember what Satan told the Lord concerning Job. He will surely curse you to your face. Job 1:11 and Job 2:5. Now the wife of Job suggests, curse God and die. Now we can be understanding of Job's wife in that she's lost possessions, she's lost children, and her husband is going through this terrible suffering. However, we cannot excuse any impiety on her part. She yields to temptation and does not maintain the integrity of Job or continue in patience as he cursed God and die. The wife of Job is mentioned later on in the book, Job 19 and verse 17. Verse 10. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. Job answered his wife, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. In this passage, the word foolish denotes impiety. Proverbs 1:7, we see a contrast between the fear of the Lord and the foolish. Proverbs 1:7, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Job is disappointed with his wife. If anyone is to give up, it should be Job. He says that the pious should accept the good as well as the adversity. Later, the friends of Job hear of all his adversity. All the adversity had come upon him in Job 2:11. The writer concludes, in all this, Job did not sin with his lips. We might say that Job's wife did sin with her lips. Job did not curse God, as said by Satan. or as suggested by his wife. As said earlier, in all this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong. Job 1:22. He was a blameless man. Not necessarily that he was sinless, but that he was above reproach. Job was a man of faith. He's a man of patience, perseverance, as said in the book of James in the New Testament. And while there are times as we study this book, Job said some things that he wished he could take back. Who hasn't in times of adversity, especially such as he experienced? But we see here that Job maintained his integrity despite being tested by Satan. In verses 11 to 13, we see number 3, Job's 3 friends. Verse 11. Now, when Job's 3 friends heard of all this adversity that had come upon him, each one came from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. Job had 3 friends. These 3 friends that are recorded here in the book heard of all the adversity that had come upon Job. It appears that months had passed since Job was first afflicted. Job 7 and verse 3. His friends were Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. Each one of his friends came from their home in order to visit Job. This appears to be some distance, that they lived outside of the country. However, the location of each home is uncertain. And in this study, we'll simply leave it at that these friends come to Job from outside of the country. And so they make the long trip and they decide to come together, to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. It says they made an appointment together to come. Perhaps they lived close by each other. However, we see that they made an appointment to come together, to come and to mourn with Job and to comfort him. This was very commendable. It was honorable that these friends chose to do so. Now, later on, as we study in the book, they did some things that were not commendable and how they treated Job. Verse 12. And when they raised their eyes from afar and did not recognize him, they lifted their voices and wept. And each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head toward heaven. When Job's 3 friends saw him from a distance, they did not recognize him at first. When they finally recognized him, they wailed and they wept. They cried. Each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head. The tearing of one's clothing and the sprinkling of dust on one's head were signs of mourning. That it was toward heaven may mean that the dust was thrown up over their heads into the sky. Lamentations 2 and verse 10. The term lamentation, the idea of lamenting, of grieving, mourning. Lamentation 2 and 10, the elders of the daughter of Zion sit on the ground and keep silence. They throw dust on their heads and gird themselves with sackcloth. The virgins of Jerusalem bow their heads to the ground. We see some of the points in that passage here in our text today in Job chapter 2 and 12. And so one might picture Job sitting on the ground, throwing up dust into the air, fell on his head, sitting in the ashes on the ground. And so his deplorable condition and his immense affliction. Verse 13. So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw that his grief was very great. How long does one mourn? Certainly everyone would be different. And there are customs regarding the lengths of these times of mourning. Here in this particular passage, in verse 13, we see how that Job's friends sat down with him on the ground. Again, I think this is commendable. They go to him for the purpose of mourning with him and to comfort him. And now they sat down with him together on the ground. Perhaps Job was still sitting in the midst of the ashes on the ground that we read about earlier in Job 2 and 8. And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. They sat with Job for 7 days. During that time, none of Job's friends spoke a word to him. The reason that they did not speak a word, that they were silent, was because they saw that his grief was very great. There seems to be this respect for his situation. Perhaps the greatest thing that these friends did during their time with Job was remaining silent. Later on, they open their mouth and we see the problems that arise. We hope that this lesson has been helpful, better understanding Job chapter 2. It's a short chapter, and Lord willing, we'll continue on with the study next time. Of course, we encourage you to study on your own. It's good to study verse by verse, but it's also good to read the book in its entirety. Take the time, sit down, read the book, and learn from the book of Job. Thank you for being here today. God bless you in your pursuit of his word.